Hello! So, today we're going to be talking about a Think Aloud strategy, and this is a teaching strategy that lots of teachers use when they decide to involve complex text within their lessons. And basically what a Think Aloud is that the teachers, as they're reading through a text or selection that they have decided for the students to look at, they will read through it and they will verbalize aloud certain questions while they're reading. And these questions can be a wide range of really anything. In my opinion, you can ask whatever you want as long as it helps the readers or your students, in other words, to have a better understanding of the text. It gives them the ability to construct meaning from the text. And so yeah, that's basically what a Think Aloud strategy is. It just allows students to be able to understand what they're reading. And I think it's great for teachers to use. The text that I decided to read is We Shall Fight on the Beaches by Winston Churchill. And as a teacher, one of the first questions that I would ask my students is, looking at this title, what do you think this speech might be about? So, a student can look at the title, We Shall Fight on the Beaches, and make, take little keywords from that title and, give those keywords descriptions, and that could really tell you what you're about to read about. So, for example, the word we indicates a group, a bunch of individuals coming together. Fight, so now the individuals are coming together and there's a conflict. So whether it be just a scuffle or a brawl, doesn't matter, there's a conflict. So a group of people having a conflict. And beaches, so clearly this conflict is taking place on a beach, or maybe a beach is just one of the places that the conflict is taking place. So I think that's a really good question to ask your students, is what can you take away from this title? So a little bit about the author, Winston Churchill, is he was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He rose to power after Neville Neville Longbottom, just kidding. The former Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, resigned because the House of Commons had deemed him unfit and unworthy to hold the position of Prime Minister, so Winston Churchill just stepped in and took over. And Churchill was a very, very good orator. He was an uncompromising leader. He refuted the idea of giving in to the Nazis. However, at the beginning of his time as Prime Minister, Great Britain's effort in World War II was just not going so well. It was, people's morale was down. They had an extreme lack of confidence because they didn't want to even be in the war in the first place. They had just finished World War I, and that had completely devastated Great Britain. They were just done. They were tired. They were so over it. So, morale was low, and everybody was just kind of really down on themselves. So, Churchill decided to give this speech, We Shall Fight on the Beaches, to kind of give the people of Great Britain hope that, they were going to get through it. They were going to make it. So, I'm going to read it's like a little introduction to the speech. Okay, so, I have a little introduction that I've written before the actual text that I selected, so I'm going to read the introduction first. Great Britain's Prime Minister Winston Churchill delivered a speech about Dunkirk to the House of Commons on June 4th, 1940. Churchill explained that the British effort in World War II was not going well and that a German invasion of Britain was possible. A gifted orator, Churchill knew he must convince the British people that victory would come someday. When Churchill gave his speech, the U.S. had not yet entered World War II. He references his hope that the New World, meaning the U.S., would join the war. Alright, so that was just a little, kind of like front-loading, almost, of what the students will be reading. Kind of gives them an idea what's going on at this time. So what I'm about to read is actually the end of Churchill's speech. So I'm going to read that now. I have myself full confidence that if all do their duty, if nothing is neglected, and if the best arrangements are made, as they are being made, we shall prove ourselves once again able to defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. At any rate, that is what we are going to try to do. That is the resolve of His Majesty's government, every man of them. That is the will of Parliament and the nation. The British Empire and the French Republic, linked together in their cause and in their need, will defend to the death their native soil, aiding each other like good comrades to the utmost of their strength. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen, or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle, until in God's good time the New World, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. Okay, so I just read the end of Winston Churchill's We Shall Fight on the Beaches, and so obviously a teacher would go through it and stop occasionally and ask questions, while going through it. And for the sake of this, and for the sake of not confusing myself, I'm just gonna kind of go back through it and ask the questions right now. I wanted to read it first so that we all kind of know that, there it is. Alright, that's the speech. Cool, got it. So now I'm going to ask the questions. And like I said, a teacher would do this as they're reading. So, one question, right here it says, arrangements are being made as they, hold on y'all. If the best, see, this is why we do this, so we don't confuse ourselves. I'm already confused though, so let's try this again. And if the best arrangements are made as they are being made, we shall prove ourselves once again able to defend our island home. So right here, I would ask my students, what does Churchill mean by prove ourselves once again? So hopefully your students already have knowledge that, we're in World War II now, so there was a World War I. Hopefully they know this, and hopefully they know that Britain fought in World War I. And even though, as Churchill said, it has been a struggle to recover from World War I, he believes that they can make it through World War II. He believes that there will be victory. So that's what he means by prove themselves once again. So moving on. So defend our island home. That was my dog, sorry. defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. So, a question I would ask my students here is, what does Churchill mean by the menace of tyranny, and who do you think the menace of tyranny is? So, tyranny is, an oppressive government. A menace is someone, at least my definition of a menace, is someone who's kind of conniving and sneaky and kind of evil, and so so what does Churchill mean by menace of tyranny, and then who do you think he is referring to as the menace of tyranny? And hopefully the students would be able to answer and say, well, he's talking about Germany, or he's talking about Hitler, or he's talking about the Nazis, because hopefully they would understand that or hopefully asking this question will help them to understand that Germany at this point in time is the enemy, especially since there's a possibility of Germany invading Britain at this time. And then he goes on to say, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. So I would ask my students, what kind of impact does that have on, if you could put yourself in the position of a soldier, or in the position of just someone who lived in Britain at this time, what kind of impact does that have on you? Like, what does that statement make you feel? So, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. So, what Churchill, I think, is trying to imply here is, they're gonna fight, and they're gonna fight through it. If it takes years, they're gonna do it, and if they have to do it alone, they'll do it too. They'll do that too. Because, as stated before, the U.S. is currently not fighting the war at this time, so Great Britain's kind of, Great Britain and France rather are kind of, fighting together, but they're, as I said earlier, it's just not going well. So then moving on from there. So that is the resolve of His Majesty's government, every man of them. That is the will of Parliament. So, a question to ask here would be, what is Parliament? What do you think that is? And, right here, it says it. His Majesty's government. Great Britain's government. That's basically what Parliament is. And so, moving on from that, it says right here, even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule. So, many people don't know what a Gestapo is, so that would be a question that I would ask my students, what do you think a Gestapo is? And what a Gestapo actually is, it was the secret police of Nazi Germany. They eliminated opposition to the Nazis, and they were the ones who were responsible for rounding up the Jews during, the time where they were bringing them to the they were gathering them all up, putting them in those trucks, and bringing them to the concentration camps. And a follow-up question I would have for that is, how does that make you feel? Churchill says, many old and famous states have fallen or may fall to the grip of the Gestapo. Like as someone, as someone who may have been there during that time, how would that make you feel hearing that? There's that. And then, let's see. So then towards the, and then he goes off on this really long rant, and it's great, it's powerful. But he goes off on this really long rant of all the places they're gonna fight. It's like, we're gonna fight here and there and up there and here and there and there, you know. And it's great. It's powerful. You know, it shows that, you know, Churchill believes that Britain should not give up. You know, they should go to the ends of the earth, before they decide to give up. And you know, that's another question that would be good to ask students. Is, you know, how do you, what, after having read all of that, you know, we shall go to the end, we shall fight in France, we shall fight in the seas, the oceans, the beaches, and on and on and on and on. How does that make you feel? Would that, you know, raise your spirits if you were a soldier or a person who was living in Great Britain at the time of World War II? And then, the very end. So, some organizing strategy, the organizing strategy that Churchill uses for this speech specifically is like the problem-solving frame. So he emphasizes, you know, solving the problem that World War II is causing. So, with that being said, there are lots of questions that you can ask your students based off of that strategy. So, like, one question is, so what's the problem? Obviously, the problem is World War II is going on. Okay, so, who has the problem? Well, you know, Great Britain has the problem, France has the problem, Germany has a huge problem, just, you know, in general at this time. The U.S. is just kind of in the background going like, hey, no, it's not my problem. So, you know, all these countries have these problems. So yeah, there's that. And then, so what is causing the problem? Obviously Germany and Adolf Hitler, who is ruling Germany at this time with his Nazi regime, they're causing a huge problem because they're invading, you know, other parts of Europe. They're gathering up all the Jews, they're doing all this stuff, and that's causing a huge problem. Who is trying to solve the problem at this point in time? The only people trying to solve the problem is Britain and France. You know, your major people are just Britain and France who are trying to solve the problem. The U.S. doesn't enter the war until after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which is in December. I think it's December 7th. So, Britain and France are trying to solve the problem. What solutions are recommended or attempted? So, one solution that Winston Churchill gave, obviously, his biggest solution is to just fight, keep going. Okay, so that was my think aloud thingy. So yeah. Yay! I'm gonna go get food now.